All right, so far we've looked at price ceilings, which are generally made to protect consumers from excessively high prices. So, for example, a city government might impose price gouging laws on snow shovels and de-icer and so on during severe winters when people really need these things. And it's kind of almost somewhat like an emergency situation, perhaps, severe weather. So again, that's what we've seen, right? Protections for consumers with price ceilings. As we move on into price floors, we see that they're generally to protect producers from excessively low prices. So in the same situation, a city might impose price collapsing laws or price floor laws on snow shovels and de-icers when winters are mild, when demand is low, right? All right, so when do price floors matter? So recall that price floors are minimum legal prices. And just like price ceilings, they don't always have an effect on the market, so they don't always matter. Why does the government impose price floors? Well, it's generally to protect suppliers, producers, firms from excessively low prices. But let's think about some of the unintended consequences that price floors might create. So think about this. Think about a $6 price floor on a gallon of milk, right? So pretty expensive for a gallon of milk. I think gallons of milk are around $2.50 or $3 a gallon. So talking twice the price. Go ahead and pause the video and think about these questions and think about how this price floor might affect the market for milk. Okay, so will the quantity of milk for sale change? The price is higher, right, than equilibrium, presumably. So what happens when price is above equilibrium? Well, hopefully you will recall that when price is above equilibrium, we have a surplus, right? So consumers purchase less because of the higher price, producers manufacture more, and so quantity supplied ends up being higher than quantity demanded, and we end up with a surplus, right? And surpluses aren't good, especially with things like milk that can go bad because as they sit on the shelf, they rot and go bad, and so nobody can benefit from them. What about the size of a typical container? What might happen there? So with loaves of bread, we saw that there's sort of an incentive for the producers to make the loaves smaller. But in this case, to sort of maybe alleviate this issue of surplus milk on the shelves, suppliers might make the containers bigger to incentivize people to make it reasonable to purchase maybe, say, a 2-gallon container of milk at $6. That might make sense. And so that might alleviate the surplus that might arise. What about, do you think that sellers would sell at a price below the floor? Would there be a black market for milk potentially? And the answer is absolutely yes. There could be a black market for milk, right? Especially if suppliers and producers are facing these surpluses with milk rotting on their shelves. That provides a pretty strong incentive to maybe try to do it illegally, right? Create a black market. And so the last question is really sort of the crux of this is that are producers better off? This is something that's supposed to protect them. So do they end up being better off? Well, certainly not, it seems. They have trouble selling what they're producing, and there's going to be a lot of spoiled milk. And maybe they have to resort to selling it illegally. So it doesn't seem to really benefit producers at all. All right, so just like with price ceilings, we basically have 3 different situations with price floors. We have non-binding price floors, which is when they don't matter. They have no effect on the market. We have binding price floors, which is when they do matter and they do have an effect on the market. And just like with price ceilings, there's different effects in the long run versus the short run. So we'll look at all 3 of these. So we will start with a non-binding price floor. Here's our market for milk. A container of milk, a gallon of milk is $3 in equilibrium. And the government imposes a $2 price floor. So recall, price floors, price can't be below the price floor. but they can be above the price floor. And since the equilibrium is above the price floor, there's no problem here. It's basically like this law doesn't even exist. There's no economic impact whatsoever. Now, with a binding price floor, such as the $6 price floor, price can't be below $6. It wants to be, right? The equilibrium is lower than $6, so it wants to be below the floor, but it can't legally. And so what that leads to is our surplus. There you see it, right? So at $6, quantity supplied is much higher than the quantity demanded, and so we have rotting milk on the shelves, a surplus. And be careful not to confuse this with consumer and producer surplus, right? Different things. Now, if you wanted to calculate the black market price, you'd basically go out to the quantity supplied and find where that quantity supplied intersects the demand curve. And as it turns out, if the market if suppliers were to sell in the black market, they would actually have to sell at a price lower than the equilibrium price originally. So definitely not helping out producers at all. They're either subject to surpluses and rotting milk, or they have to resort to selling on the black market for a lower price than they were selling when they were able to sell at the equilibrium price. All right, and then of course, again, in the long run, our curves are more elastic, so they are flatter, and so a binding price floor becomes worse. It becomes bigger, right? The surplus expands. And the black market price is even lower. So really, really bad outcomes in the long run. All right, if you want to see a pop culture example of minimum wage, which is a price floor, and what we will be talking about next, you can find this scene in Mary Poppins when she quits because she's not getting paid enough.